Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Extra Reps with Adrienne. Today we're going to be talking about my transition to West Virginia and finishing up my college career. I just graduated officially, I guess, a couple of days ago. Just kind of walking through the transfer process, what it was like adapting to a new team, and some of the challenges that came along with it. So without further ado, let's get started. So we left off the last episode just talking about the beginning of kind of that winter break, going into like November, December, when I was at home and really just struggling to find kind of like who I was, what I wanted to do, and battling a lot of things internally that, I hadn't really either dealt with, or maybe people didn't even realize the capacity to which I was dealing with these things. And like I said, I knew the environment wasn't great for my mental health, and that the volleyball in and of itself wasn't the most productive for me, but I had some of my best friends and my greatest memories and some things that I'll cherish my entire life down in Tallahassee and on campus. And so to leave that was so hard, and it felt just so rushed because season ended so quickly, not only because of COVID, but we didn't even realize, we didn't know if we were going to have that season. We didn't realize like it would get cut short, only playing 4 matches. And then to just kind of be picked up and taken home almost as soon as I got out of the quarantine house was a really fast way to rip that Band-Aid off and, to leave. And you'll never have enough time to like say goodbye, or whether it's graduating at normal time or during COVID, but it was so rushed and I was just so sad to be leaving. And so that whole like winter break, I had really lost a lot of that competitive fire, as I said, just because of the way I was treated. But I knew that there was still something left to prove. So my mindset quickly had to shift from kind of like this very sad and kind of, internally just deteriorating mindset. So the mindset quickly had to change from kind of this like, toxic environment and telling myself all these bad negative things about myself and how I could play, who I was as a person, to now I have something to prove. I have a new opportunity to come into this team and hopefully make an impact. I didn't know at the time what it was going to be, and how I was going to impact the program. And so I had to get my mind ready to coming in with these new eyes. But instead of them being freshman eyes, they're a little bit more experienced because I have been through some things, both in high school and throughout college, on and off the court. And to bring that experience with me, I know what it takes to play in the NCAA tournament. I know what takes to play at a top 25 level and train at that level consistently. But also, this is a whole new program. I'm new to the coaching staff, I'm new to the girls. It's just going to be a whole different, season and who we're playing against, and it's still COVID. So once I kind of got in that mindset, things got better. I had to prepare for the conditioning test, which, as I mentioned, I'm not a fan of running. So preparing for that was really stressful. And that was a big part of kind of that anxiety of during that break. Like I had to work out because I wanted to pass this test, but I was still battling, like, I don't want to do anything. I'm not happy. And just kind of this like negative self-talk. So it was a lot of battling this internal voice in my head and things that had impacted it from previous environments. And so I get on campus, my dad and I move my stuff into my apartment. I'm living with 3 just, NARPs, no athletes, because everyone on the team already had roommates. I'm transferring mid-season, so it's a little bit harder and trickier, and it's COVID, so it's even more, conflicting trying to find a place to stay. I get on campus, I'm all excited, I have my nice apartment. It's super similar to what I had at Florida State, so that was very nice. I had a car for the first time. I never had a car down at Florida State. I had a little moped, but this was the first time I was going to need a car because I lived on like the top of this mountain over here. To get to the Coliseum, you had to go down the mountain, across the river, up the other mountain, and that's where the Coliseum was. And so I could see it from my apartment view and vice versa, which was always a nice like reminder, when practice was over, like, okay, I just got to make it home, go to bed, or after those early morning workouts, like it was so close. And all of my classes were going to be online. So I was going in as a grad student, and I was going to extend the program over 2 years rather than just the 1 year that it normally takes, because I had 2 years of eligibility left. And at the time that I transferred, I went as a walk-on because I was going to be able to get in-state tuition, and, it wasn't going to be super expensive, but this was a program I thought I could make an impact, and the coaches believed in me, and that was huge. And not that the other coaches or programs didn't, but this just seemed much more like the fit that I needed for my career. And while talking to them, I did kind of allude to like some of the issues that I was facing and battling, but I don't think they understood the full extent of it. So when I got on campus, I tried to kind of, just pretend like those things almost like didn't happen. But when I'd get to practice, there were times where I'd be so nervous. Like if I messed up, like at Florida State, we would do mountain climbers. If you messed up, if you had whatever kind of error, you'd drop down and do mountain climbers, or the team might have to like run it down and back or something. So I'd have like a setting error because at the time, so I wasn't able to compete right away in that spring because I had played in a couple points of the previous fall matches. So I was just on the B side again, which this time it was different because I knew I was there because I couldn't play. And I knew, or I was hoping that like I'd be able to earn a spot fairly being on the A side eventually. And so I'm on the B side, and my mindset is a little bit different than some of the girls that had been there. It was similar to how I was at Florida State. Like, we're on the B side, the coaches don't care, whatever. It kind of sucks. But I knew I was only over on that side because I couldn't play. And so my goal was to kind of rally everyone together and be like, listen, I know we're over here, but our job is to make the A side better, to prove that we're here to, play and compete and that we're just as capable, and we're going to push them every day. So I was a setter because they had a setter transfer mid-year as well. So I got to run that side and kind of brought back to a degree some confidence, but also setting was this place that I had been so used to having success, and then it was all kind of like taken down that I got nervous. And anytime I'd make a mistake, I'd be so ready to get like yelled at or screamed at or have a punishment, or the people on the team to kind of be like, what are you doing? And it wasn't like that at all. Like, they understood I just got here. They understood that, I was figuring things out, and I'm trying to like find my place on this team because, like I said, I'm not a freshman, but I am new to the program. So going back a little bit, I guess, to the conditioning test in my like first couple of days of practice. When I first got on campus, we had like a start date set for when we were going to run the conditioning test, and everyone has to pass it. And if you don't pass, you just like keep running it until you pass. And if you ask anybody that's ever played at West Virginia, this is the worst part of the whole program, is this conditioning test, because it pushes you more mentally. Obviously, physically, it's exhausting, but I think once you have that like mental mindset of you're not going to fail, and you have trained and done all the work, and you stay calm during it, you're going to be just fine. So I had been training and running it on the treadmill all break basically and leading up to this point. And then it got moved back because someone on the team tested positive for COVID. And so we had like another 10-day backtrack. Well, then one of my roommates tested positive for COVID. So I was back another day. So the first like 30 days that I was there, or like 40 days I was there, like 20 of them were in quarantine in my little tiny apartment, which was not the most ideal situation, especially when trying to like figure everybody out and like meet people. And like I said, I had so many friends at Florida State and I was involved in so many things. I just kind of expected it to be similar. And it was not, over the 2 years, not at all what I expected it to be going in, both in good ways and bad ways. But I definitely did not make those same connections, which we can get into a little bit later. But, I'm in quarantine. It's not great. It's snowing. It's cold. It's like the worst winter they've had in like 6 years. And I'm, eating myself alive, getting ready for this conditioning test because I want to prove that I'm there. I had never passed the conditioning test really at Florida State. There was only like one situation where I somewhat passed it, which that'll be a good story for one of my friends when she comes on eventually, about how we were the only two that had to run the conditioning test one time. But finally the day comes where I'm cleared to come back to the team and like train. And so before practice, so practice was at like 6:30, maybe 7 in the morning. So I had to run the conditioning test before that. and I was supposed to be running all by myself, but Sky ended up having to run it again because she didn't pass the day, like the day before, whenever they had run it. And so that made me feel a little bit better that I wasn't by myself. Um, but it was still so stressful, and I like couldn't eat. I didn't sleep. I probably slept maybe 3 hours total. I woke up shaking and just like crying and so worked up about this test. And I mean, I know the point of the test is obviously to like see who's mentally tough and can handle it, but just with everything that I had been going through to like have this anxiety that I know if I don't pass, I have to keep doing it. And that, you don't get your gear and you don't get all this stuff, that I wanted to prove a point that I could do it. But I was so scared and had been fed all these negative thoughts that I didn't think I was going to be able to. So that morning, I'm running the test. This is the first time I've run it like for real on a basketball court, which I may or may not recommend, but it's still nerve-wracking. It's the Coliseum, all these big bright lights, giant scoreboard, and the team's kind of like setting up the net. And I don't really know anyone either at this point because it's my very first practice with the full team. And so I'm kind of freaking out. Sky and I end up passing it. The very like last leg of it though, my legs were shot, and it wasn't even like that I was I was tired, but mentally I was like, come on, you have to finish this. And I was telling myself to keep running, but my legs were not moving anywhere. And luckily Lacey was behind me and she like pushed me across the finish line to like make sure I got in on time. But I was like, I fell down. I was so tired. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I still have like a 2.5 hour practice. And at this point, I'm running a 5-1 on the B side, but we still had punishments or whatever if like you win or lose, like different drills. So I finished that. I'm putting my volleyball stuff on, and I'm like, okay, like I can do this. It's just volleyball. And we had conditioning after practice. And so I was like, there's no way that I'm going to have to do the full conditioning because I just did the whole conditioning test. It's my first day back and I'm practicing. So we go through practice, I'm winded. I remember like watching the film back later that night, and we played doubles. We did all these kind of like tiring drills, and I'm bent over the whole practice, so tired. And we get done with practice and, whatever, we're getting ready for conditioning. And she's like, yep, get online. We're doing this thing. And the conditioning we did is called Around the World. And I was paired with like two of the faster people on the team. And part of it was just because they were like nice and like, hey, you can join our group. So I'm like, okay, sounds good. Well, I didn't realize at the time that they're super fast and I'm still dead. My legs are shot. And so we're doing this and I'm like basically getting lapped. I might as well have been getting lapped by them. But all they care about at West Virginia for conditioning is just to finish and to give your full out effort, whatever that is that day. So we get done and we kind of huddle up and we talk about it. And I don't even know why, but I was basically on the verge of crying already. It's so different than Florida State. I don't have these connections right away. It's scary. It's hard. And then I'm proud of myself for passing, but I'm almost like still worked up about it. Like the emotions from weeks of leading up to having to run it and then finally doing it and passing, it was just a lot. So we get done. And one of the girls on the team, Natalie Winter, who I ended up like, we were the only seniors together this year. She just kind of like looked at me and was like, I think you could have like pushed harder. Like, I think you need to do better. And I just remember in that moment being like, what did I sign myself up for? Because that was crazy. That was nothing like anything I'd ever done before. At Florida State, all of our practices and then like lift or conditioning were separate. So we'd lift or condition in the morning and then come in later for practice. So like we might do like a little 30-minute lift before practice, but we never did anything big before or after practice. And so I was just kind of like, what am I doing? Like, these girls are crazy. If they think like I need to work harder, like I passed the test, which I was so proud of myself for. But like I was dying. I gave everything I could in that moment. And you want me to give more? And I was just kind of like, I mean, okay, like I get if that's what we're doing, then I'm all on board with that because I want to like do well and succeed. But there was a brief moment of just kind of like, okay, like, am I sure I really want to be here? And I'd kind of been having those thoughts like the whole time I was in quarantine, especially just because I'm by myself. Like all my friends that I'd call, like Alyssa and Emma, like I would just break down crying too. Like it's so hard to be here and I'm by myself and it's not the same. And they don't have the same kind of like student athlete community that Florida State did, which I had grown so accustomed to. They kept telling me like, it'll pay off, like we miss you, we want to come visit, and we FaceTimed a lot. I'd call my parents a lot. My dad at one point came up to visit for like a couple, like 3 or 4 days, I think, because he knew I was struggling. And so being 4 hours away, it made it a lot nicer that they could come and help out. And, it took a lot of adjusting. It was not an easy transition. And I would get hot chocolate dates with our assistant coach and just kind of like, the first time I don't think she realized how much I was struggling. She was just kind of checking in, and we're at this little cafe and I just start crying. And I don't think she was ready for it, but I was just like, it's so hard, it's so different, I don't know like what's going on. And just again, a lot of those doubts kind of creeping into my mind. So she was the one that suggested that I go talk to the sports psychologist. And that was a huge thing, even when I was being recruited by them. Like they had a sports psychologist for the team at Florida State. And I don't know if it's still like this, but at the time, they only had one hired sports psychologist and like a GA on staff for the whole athletic department. So it was almost impossible to get in with her. But at West Virginia, they offered per team, everyone had a sports psych. So at the time it was Blake. And, I kind of go in and again, like I've said, I don't like sharing my story, and I have a hard time opening up and trusting people, especially in the beginning. Like I just kind of put on that brave face, or like, I know the right things to say, but I also knew that I like needed and wanted some help, because the way and the path that I was going mentally, like I don't think would have been very productive for my like volleyball career there. And so we started talking, and, one meeting, like I just kind of broke down crying and was telling him everything that happened at Florida State and how I felt like I failed and I disappointed people, and just, having to like bounce back from how much I had been torn down. And we talked through it a lot. And he is definitely a big reason why like I had the season I did that upcoming fall, because we were able to talk about all of these things and kind of put in perspective like what's in my control, what's out of my control, what I can do to help, and what's just, what I'm going to have to learn to manage. And so that was definitely a very eye-opening experience, which again kind of kept this like fire going for what I'm doing now and sharing stories and having other people on and wanting to mentor young athletes because of, the help that I got and the experiences that I've had so far. That spring was pretty rough because I couldn't compete. So the team got to go on like bus rides together, and, we didn't have a great spring, but at this point, everyone was sick and tired of playing with each other because they had been together since the fall or summer even. And it was just a lot of time together. Like you're going to have little cat fights, but it gets amplified the more and more you're together. And the team chemistry, like I said, like at Florida State, when I had some great team chemistry, it was definitely not like that when I first got there, a very different vibe with the girls, and just, I'm coming into the team brand new. So it was harder to kind of make friends and figure out like who wants to go hang out, like what do we do here, like what's the norm, because I had no idea what it was. And it's still COVID, I don't know what we're allowed to do or whatever. We don't want to get sick, we don't want to be in the wrong spot, but how do we still have this like chemistry, hangout, team bonding without, overdoing it? So then that spring, I'm just competing and pushing as hard as I can. And I continued to just set basically at practices. And then after practice, Reed would kind of pull us aside and like work with me on some hitting stuff. But it was like 20-30 minutes after practice, and that was it. I'm kind of worrying. I'm like, how am I supposed to like earn my spot as a hitter, hopefully a 6 rotation hitter, if I'm not really even working on hitting? It definitely pushed me to like make those 30 minutes count. And then on top of that, it was, even more drive for the summer and that preseason to like prove myself, work really hard to get to where I wanted to be and where the coaches wanted me to be. And so leading into the summer, this was the first year that they were kind of like offering for us to come back earlier in the summer to work out. And part of that incentive was if we came back early and we were in a good spot, that we wouldn't have to run the river over the summer, which I will take partial credit for kind of putting that into Sweeney's mind of like, hey, we can come back and just keep working out and then not have to run the river. And I think they kind of realized it would be a good incentive, because then that means, we're back on campus and working on volleyball related workouts, conditioning, and they can see us like when we're away from campus. Obviously there's so many question marks of like, who's actually working out? How hard are you working? Are you going to be ready for season? But when we're on campus, it's a lot easier because you see us, we're working on the things we need to do and we're putting in hard work. So we got to come back like the first full week of June. I get the month of May off. And during this month, I'm still feel pretty just kind of like uncertain about everything. Like, am I really making the right choice here? Do I belong here? Did I make a mistake in coming here? I miss my friends. I still don't have any good friendships after, being on campus for 5 months. So I decided to take a drive down to Nashville and to Tallahassee to like hang out with some of my old teammates and friends. And that was such a good like week. I literally just kind of told my friends like, I'm leaving, I'm driving to Florida. Drove down, hung out with my friends, and was able to just kind of get away, de-stress, have my friends, realize they're still going to be my friends. And, even if our FaceTime talks get further and further apart, like we're still there for each other. Got to catch up with all of them. It was a great time. And it was almost a nice kind of closing chapter, because I did go back to like Tallahassee and to like drive back onto campus and like into my apartment, like where my former roommates and like they still lived. To like go in there was just so weird, because it wasn't mine anymore, but it still holds such a special place in my heart. And we went to a couple baseball games. We had our like Sonic late night drives and hung out on the rooftop, just like the olden days. But it still felt different, but it was still such a just nice relief to go back and see like it's still the Florida State that I like fell in love with and had so many great memories at. Now it's just, it was kind of my closing chapter of my experience at Florida State. And I can't wait to go back and visit, bring like my future family to like a Florida State football game, like go have reunions with my teammates and friends. But it was just a nice way to kind of go back and on my own terms almost kind of have that final parting, instead of it being so rushed like it was when I actually left. So then fast forwarding a little bit, I come back, we're working out over the summer. I start to make some more friendships and kind of like learn more about the team dynamic, what it takes to play in the Big 12, our goals for that year. And most importantly, I did not have to run the river that summer when the freshmen got on campus. So they get on campus and we have a pretty experienced team. We had like 7 or 8 seniors, and then technically like I wasn't a senior, but again, I have 4 years of experience, and we had quite a few freshmen as well. So we had a good mix, but we were definitely like, if this was the year to make anything happen, this now was the time, because we had these girls that had been there for 4 years. I joined, another transfer senior outside hitter joined the team, and we had some great underclassmen to push us in practice and make contributions when their name was called. So practices totally different than at Florida State. We got, a lot of gameplay. So as we start preseason, I'm starting to find my rhythm. Serve receive is a whole new world in college, and I have not worked on it a whole lot since high school. And to make some strides in that, to make myself a 6 rotation player, to get better at hitting, blocking, just to finally have that confidence on the court. And like I said, I had been meeting with Blake, all spring and starting into the summer, and he ended up getting a new job. So we brought a new sports psychologist in, Chip, who again was such an influential part of my story there. And again, forever indebted to what he did for me, and so happy to have him as a mentor in my life. But going into that season, I'm starting, which is so exciting. I still kind of like would flinch, like if I made a mistake that like I was going to get yelled at or like subbed out or whatever. And, we would joke that I was like a little foster puppy that needed some love and like attention to kind of boost the confidence and like someone to tell me it's going to be okay. So we would go through practices. I'm finding that groove. I'm gaining so much confidence, pushing myself, expecting more and more each time. We get into gameplay and we have the best starting record like in West Virginia history. We started out 10-0. We swept Michigan, we swept Navy, we're playing some good teams. We played Buffalo, and that was the first time that I really started to like struggle. I was not hitting well, and I was having hitting errors. Some were good, some were not as good. I think I had a double called on me when I tried to like help set a ball, which does not happen very often. And so I'm getting frustrated, kind of like curling back into my shell. And if you know me or like just watching me play, like I talk a lot, like I'm constantly trying to give to my teammates, but it's easy to get internal when things aren't going well. And so I start to have hitting errors and I'm just kind of like flinching, like waiting for him to sub me out. And at one point, I don't remember if he called a timeout or if it was just like in the rally or whatever, but he just kind of like yelled at me. He was like, Adrian, I'm not subbing you out. Figure it out. I was like, oh, okay. Like, so then I kind of, even though he yelled at me or like, raised his voice, it got my attention that like he believed in me and we were going to work through this and you've got to figure it out and be confident. Like, quit looking over to the sidelines and like waiting for something to happen. Like, you're out there, figure it out. And we won the match in 4, I believe. But that was the first time where I realized like he truly believed in me and that I could contribute to this team and that he wasn't going to like make me second guess myself, at least not in that point, right? So that was a huge stepping stone for me personally, of just like that mentality of I am capable and I'm going to keep working really hard and I have to figure it out no matter what, and to not be afraid to keep swinging even when things aren't going well. So, we're having a good season. We lose Penn State where we start Big 12 play, and with the COVID schedule, we would play back-to-back nights. So like Thursday, Friday, or Friday, Saturday, which made it really nice for traveling because like when we went to Texas, that was the only time we went to UT. And then when we went to, we didn't play at Baylor, but like when we went to wherever it was, we went to Kansas State last year. We just went to Kansas State and we played there 2 nights. So it was a lot easier travel schedule than I was kind of used to, but it was also just really convenient. And I wasn't in any in-person, I might have been in like one in-person class. The whole time I was at West Virginia, I think I took like 2 classes, maybe 3 classes at most per semester. So I was on a really light schedule, which was super nice. It was kind of like a taste of what pro might be like, where all of your effort and focus is just basically on volleyball, which had pros and cons, of course. I didn't have to wake up early, but there were times where like I didn't even have something to distract me if volleyball wasn't going well. So had to learn to manage that, and Chip and I talked about things like that all the time. Right around like after a week or so into Big 12 play, it might have just been even before Big 12 play, where I started to have all these like feelings like I wasn't doing enough, or like that, if I had a bad game, like people were upset with me. Like, again, just this bad energy and negative self-talk that I wasn't doing enough, or that, people didn't believe in me or trust me, and that, we'd lose one game once we got into conference and I felt like it was my fault, or that people were blaming me because that's what I had been used to. And I kind of broke down, and there was one time where like Lacey and I talked about it because she kind of saw me. I was like, are you okay? And I try to put on a brave face, but then there's just sometimes where I can't do it anymore by myself, and I kind of look out for help. So I talked with her, I talked with Tracy, our assistant, we had our hot chocolate dates and stuff. And eventually kind of got over that and got my confidence back. And, with talking to some of the girls, like they didn't even realize that I had been through such like traumatic things in high school or college, that they were so surprised when I would kind of tell them about like my struggles internally. And it was, again, eye-opening that, like I was able to hide it so well, but also like then when they would talk about things they had been through, if they had transferred or whatever, just how many people go through stuff and you don't even realize it, and that your impact on someone can really help them or it can really hurt them. So being aware and like open to, what your teammates are saying and talking about, and just being a good like listening ear, being a good teammate for them is always important. And I desperately needed that at times. And like, I'm lucky to have found some people that were able to help. So moving through that season, I'm having a great year. I'm getting some recognition, but again, like nothing crazy. I'm just out there playing volleyball. I'm having fun. This was like the season where I fell in love with volleyball again. And it was such a relief to finally have that feeling like I wanted to go out and compete. I wanted to go to practice. I loved what I was doing. I loved playing. And it was as simple as that. Just being on the court again made me happy. I think at one point, like my parents were just so happy, like to see me smiling. Like my pictures at Florida State, I would cheer and smile, but the demeanor was totally different at West Virginia last year, that I was just happy to be out there. And you can tell in all my smiles and all my pictures that I am just genuinely enjoying the game again. So we end up making the NCAA tournament for the first time in program like school history. It was amazing. It was such a cool feeling because for me at some points, that was the fourth time I had gone. And at Florida State, it was an expectation to make it. And so that was normal for me. I guess I kind of would say I took it for granted at points. But at West Virginia, like that's what we were fighting for every single Big 12 game. And that's why we pushed so hard to start 10-0. To be sitting in that room, I guess I kind of had some like false confidence that, that we were going to make it because we had this whole watch party and stuff. But I guess we weren't really a shoe-in, even though I was like, yeah, we got this, we're in. And everyone else was super nervous. And I was like, we're fine, we're going to make it. And we were one of like the last teams like in the regions to be called. And everybody went crazy. It was so exciting. And it was just such a cool feeling. Like all this hard work had paid off. I was happy. I was so ready to go to battle and like fight with these girls. And then to just experience, some of these girls had been there for 4 years and like this is what they had been working for that whole time. So to finally get it senior year was really special. And we get to go to UK and we play Illinois. So I got to play against one of my former teammates. And I ended up having a great game. I have a ton of family and friends there, and it was just so special to like see them out in the stands. And I always have loved playing in front of a crowd, and especially when my family's there, it just means even more. So that game was truly one of a kind and was a highlight of my probably whole volleyball career, even though we ended up losing in 4. After, that match, we come home. I get to come home for break, hang out with my friends, my family, and just, again, take some time for myself. Every Christmas break, without fail, it's so hard to get back into the routine of working out because you just want to take not even a physical break, but just a mental break from the everyday in and out of the gym, hard work that is going on. Like for 6 months, it is nonstop, and you just want to have a little bit of time to decompress. But for us, we have our conditioning test, the river, coming up as soon as we get back on campus. So for me, I would take, a week or so to like relax, help my body recover a little bit from everything I just put it through, mentally just be with my friends and family, and then, make my way back to the treadmill. And then this year was going to be, so like starting in January, was going to be a totally different experience from the previous year. Last year, we had so many upperclassmen and there were so many leaders. They knew what was going on within the program. And I didn't have to be as big of a like vocal leader going into the spring. There were 6 or 7 of us total. And it was me, Natalie Winter, and then a senior that was there training, Kristen Lux, were like the only upperclassmen. Everybody else was freshman, sophomore. Which was a little scary because we had 7 or 8 freshmen coming in that summer as well. So there was going to be so many underclassmen and a lot of big shoes to fill. This was my time where I had to learn how to lead and grow and be able to hold them accountable and still be able to get things out of it, like for myself, and push myself. The spring workouts are always tough. I mean, this spring was no exception. I think mentally the first spring I was there was harder just because I was still figuring things out. It was a new strength coach, new weight room, new people I was lifting with, just a different expectation. And so it was hard. It was like almost nerve-wracking. Like I wanted to make sure I did everything right. And this January was more, now I know what to expect from Sweeney and from my teammates, at least like what their expectation level should be. But now it's even harder because we're putting more and more weight on. We're growing, we're pushing. We just got a brand new weight room. So we have all these new things we can do. At one point we did like a 15-minute wall sit. We're doing like hip press challenges with crazy weight on it or crazy reps. So it was a big growing year for us in the weight room and conditioning. That spring for volleyball, though, was really stressful because there was only 7 of us, and one of our assistant coaches got a new job. So we were kind of in this limbo where we only really had one coach on campus with like recruiting and, other things going on. And it became a very almost like hostile environment because, we weren't progressing like we wanted to. Like for us players, we were getting bored with drills. We were just getting, we're doing the same thing over and over. And for me, especially, and a couple like Lux and Noodle, we were older than some of these other girls, and they needed maybe a little bit more of the basics because they're still figuring out college volleyball. They're just freshmen. They played on the B side majority of the time. Like they're still trying to figure it out, whereas we need something new to push us. And you can always find ways to like get things out of drills, but it was after week 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're still kind of doing the same simple things. We were getting super frustrated. And at one point we like talked to Chip during our weekly team meeting, and I went up and I talked to our assistant coach, and we're just kind of like, listen, like we need something new, we need something more. We knew she had a lot on her plate, and that, it's not necessarily just her fault, but from our side and our point of view, we needed to keep going and not to feel like we were kind of stuck in the mud. And that spring, then we hired a new assistant coach, a setting coach, and Fiona had done some great things in her career, and we were super excited to have a setting coach on campus. And she just brought this like new life and new energy to the team. And the spring had a lot of challenges, I guess, just within like you only have 7 people. It's a big responsibility. You have a lot more free time on the weekends. You have a lot more downtime because workouts were in the morning, and then you're done by 9:30, 10 o'clock. A lot bigger responsibility too for the girls, like trying to step up into these new roles and play at the higher level and compete and see what it takes to do that. And after the year we just had, of course, the goal is to make it there again, or, to win certain games during Big 12 and all this stuff. So that summer, we had all the freshmen come on campus. And I have so many stories for days about these freshmen coming on campus, and they definitely made life interesting, to say the least. A lot of very stressful times and some really hard lessons throughout the season. Thankfully, I had a few other people like on staff, like Hunter, our manager, and Ty, who did stats and stuff. Like I was able to just kind of talk to them about things, which helped at practice because Chip wasn't always at practice, and just some of the frustrations we could share. And they were just able, just like the managers at Florida State, were able to kind of help alleviate and be kind of these sources of light during some really hard practices or just rough times in general. This summer was a lot of learning about myself. Like I really had to step up and be a vocal leader. Like things that I thought were just so, like common sense were not common sense for them. I had been in college for 6 years, so at this point that's just the normal and expectation. But I had to learn a lot in how to communicate with them, how to get my point across to them, but also for them to like still respect me. Like I didn't want to come in and just be a dictator and take over and, be just this grumpy like person all the time. I wanted to still enjoy the season. I wanted to enjoy them, like we can be friends, but I do have to set some like ground rules for the program to start off with too. And having only 2 seniors and then 1 junior, there's not a lot of upperclassmen, so they definitely outnumbered us. That was kind of scary because some of them, freshmen and sophomores, they may have thought like they knew what was going on or could handle things, and then maybe it didn't work out the way they wanted. A lot of hard work and a lot of stressful nights. There were definitely a lot of nights like I would be crying on the phone with, my boyfriend or my parents or whoever, just like, this is so hard. Like, I just want to play volleyball and not have to worry about this stuff. And from the previous year, it was, like I didn't have to worry about any of the outside drama. Really, like I just went and played and it was no big deal. And this year, every problem got brought to me or Noodle because or the captains were the seniors, and I had to address things. And confronting people or like addressing issues is never fun because it's awkward and it's just like very vulnerable spot because people get defensive. People, say things they wish they don't, like wish they wouldn't want to. And it just is so hard to manage. I think we ended up having 14 girls by the end of it with transfers and stuff. And so, this season I kind of say was more about like leading and growing into my full like confident leader mode because the volleyball was not very good. And I mean, there were definitely highlights. There were definitely moments and glimpses where you could see, that we were making progress as a team. The freshmen were catching on, and the freshmen did get to play a lot, which caused a lot of, internal issues because it felt to some of the other people that like it was just kind of given to them. And that became a huge source of like hostility within the team of like making sure even though you have a spot that you continue to work hard for it because nothing is given, nothing is a guarantee. And there was just, with 14 girls and so many underclassmen, the maturity, the perspective, all of that is just a lot to handle, especially, you're also adjusting to college in general. Now college volleyball, the coaches are on you. The coaches, maybe you're saying things you don't want to hear. You're not performing the way that you normally do. We're not getting the results. I mean, we had a losing season, which for me, and I'm sure most of the people on the team, was the first time ever that you had a losing season or that you weren't the best on the team or even the best like in the conference. And that can be really eye-opening because losing always brings out kind of the worst in people or it continues to highlight the flaws. Whereas when you win, everything's happy and like things just kind of get brushed under the rug. But when you're losing, it just becomes that more obvious or apparent, like what's going on, what the issue is with the team dynamic. And so, I mean, there was a lot of personalities. There was a lot of, different characters from all over the country on the team. And it was just kind of a modge podge of people. And while I wouldn't trade that experience for the world, because now, they would call me Meemaw and like I was their grandma because I was like 5 and 6 years older than some of these girls, which was crazy. And they would make jokes all the time. Like, you played in college before I even played in high school. Like what iPhone came out when you were in college, like all these ridiculous things. And I love them all to pieces. And I appreciate, everything that they brought to the team and have brought to my life. But there were some times where it was really hard to want to show up to practice. Noodle and I were ready for season to be over with because A, it's just not going well. And B, there's just so many things that I never thought we would have to worry about, like on a team, like volleyball aside, just so many things that we felt were so unnecessary or like petty or just why are we having to deal with and address this stuff, that it made it more mentally and emotionally exhausting than it did physically. Like physically, we were basically getting swept like every game. Like practices were tough, but they were nowhere near as tough as they had been the past year because we knew last year that was our chance to make it. And so did our coaches. Like, they were pushing us hard because they knew what we were capable of. And this year they did push us, but to what extent, to what limit? Because the freshmen, how much can you push them before they break? Or how, like, we only have 14 people and we don't have a whole lot of depth in every position. So like you have to be mindful of that and the wear and tear on people's bodies. It was just a very different year and it was very frustrating, very stressful. And not that I'm glad season's over because I miss those girls so much and I miss, seeing them every day. Like I said with Florida State, things will never be the same, and like trying to enjoy those moments with them of like enjoying the suck at practice, like when we're losing or when the coaches aren't happy with us or whatever, like finding the good in it when the music was really good and we got to sing along and listen to it before they turned it off, or just having fun with certain drills and games and joking around. Like that stuff was fun, and like being able to compete and play well, especially early on in season, was a lot of fun. But by the end of it, my competitive fire, that light had been so burnt out because no matter what I felt like I did, I never felt like it was enough to help the team. And not that my stats were overly great this year, and we're more than a box score, but when you're looking at the stats, like there's things I wish I could take back, like a hit or two there, and what more I could have done to help the team. But I also know that what I brought to the court and hopefully my impact on them will help them navigate college volleyball for the rest of their career, and that they can learn some valuable life lessons as well as, some volleyball IQ, or, just how to deal with situations. Like, things aren't always going to go your way in life or in volleyball, and you've got to make the most of it. Being able to shake things off easy, being able to look for the next point, not get so caught up in what just happened, and to be a good teammate, which was a huge key point this season, was being a good teammate, treating people like you want to be treated. How can you push people without crossing a line? There's just so many things, like, I hope that I was able to tell them and like help them with. And that's also not part of the reason, but when I told them I was going to start a podcast, they were all super excited, and I was like, well, you let me know what you want me to talk about on the podcast, and I'll try to make an episode or bring somebody on to talk about it, so Meemaw can still help you guys out. Yeah, overall, West Virginia was a whirlwind of emotions. I didn't have that same community that I did at Florida State. I didn't have those close relationships really like I did at Florida State. I had West Virginia, I had my team, and that was pretty much the extent of the people I hung out with on campus. Still made quite a few like faculty connections and was able to go to some cool events, but it was a very different environment. And then volleyball wise, I grew to love the game again. I had the coaches in my corner and helping me out. And then it kind of shifted to like starting over in square one and almost teaching college volleyball to all these freshmen and sophomores. It stretched me. It made me learn. It made me grow in so many different ways. And I'm so grateful for those experiences and those opportunities. Again, in the moment, may not have always been great. We made the most of it. We are, finished up, just graduated, and, still in touch with some of the girls here and there. And quite a few people have transferred, which, again, is a whole like another can of worms that we could unpack with why people transfer in the transfer portal and all kinds of stuff on here. It's never an easy decision to transfer, and it's, sometimes it works out really well and sometimes it doesn't work out exactly as you imagine. Like, I'm not going to say everything is perfect within the program or within any program, obviously, but there are programs that are better fits for different people. But I think that's super important to keep in mind, like what fits for one person may not fit for another person. And everyone has their own unique story, which is what makes everyone themselves. West Virginia ended up being a pretty good place for me to, fall in love with volleyball again, make it the next step to hopefully go pro and, make some good connections and learn great life lessons. There definitely is a whole different side to college athletics than just meets the eye, just goes to social media or gets covered, on TV. I hope that this was able to kind of give you an inside look. College athletics is not all it's cracked up to be. And I don't want this to be like a total negative experience or like to deter anyone from playing a college sport, but just to share like the actual truth. Like coaches will say almost anything to get you to go there, and you have to find a school that really wants you for you and a school that you'll be happy at regardless of how your sport is going. That's why I'd like encourage you, if you're going through this process, to really take your time and get to know the coaches, talk to players that are on the bench or don't get to play as much, and kind of see what the culture is like for the team. Culture, everyone talks about like you either have it or you don't, but it's something that's just like created, and it's a habit, and you have to have the right people in the program to continue that culture. I'd say overall, when I was in the portal, I wanted to go somewhere that I was going to make an impact and be able to be a part of something really special. And so every semester basically of the 2 years that I was there, it was almost like total 180s of the team and what was expected of me and my role. Some of the lessons I had to learn were hard along the way. Not winning a single game this year in conference was tough, and to have that be your senior year is a hard pill to swallow. I had to shift that mindset from I'm not going to get these immediate results. I'm going to do what I can on the court and to the best of my ability, but at the end of the day, we'll just see what happens, and not to get so caught up in stats and the awards at the end of the year, and to go play volleyball and be the best teammate that I could be. I'm helping them right now so that maybe in the future, this team, this program, these girls will be even better than when I left them. I think with that, we'll wrap up this episode. I think this episode may be one of the last ones where I'm just by myself. Next week, we'll have a special guest along with an exciting announcement. I think by this time next week, I will be, on to my next chapter of life, which is a little bit nerve-wracking and a little bit exciting. And so that episode will be coming next Wednesday. So stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.